Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're taking a deep dive into platform capitalism, but don't worry, we're not just talking about the usual suspects like Google and Facebook.
Yeah, those are the obvious ones.
Right. But this source goes way beyond, showing how this platform model is popping up everywhere. Seriously, from like how your toothbrush is made to, how you might call a cab years from now. It's kind of wild.
It really is. One of the things that struck me about this source is how it connects platforms to these huge shifts in history. Like they're comparing it to the Renaissance or the Enlightenment.
Wow, that's a big deal. Big turning points for sure.
Exactly. Periods of massive change. And this time, they're saying it's all about how businesses are using data.
That data is the new oil thing, right? And
Mhm.
honestly, I hear it everywhere, but I'm not always sure I get what it really means. Sounds kind of dramatic.
Right. It does, kind of. It's easy to think of data as this, invisible force, almost magical, but this source wants us to see it more as a raw material. Think about it like oil. Oil is valuable, sure, but you need the infrastructure, refineries, pipelines, all that, to actually turn it into something we can use.
So you're saying data is the same.
Exactly. It needs to be collected, processed, analyzed. And that's where platforms come in. They're becoming the masterminds of that whole process.
So having data isn't enough. It's what you do with it that matters.
Exactly. And platforms are designed to leverage that. They're these powerful go-betweens connecting different groups, like buyers and sellers, obviously, users and advertisers, even machines in those smart factories we hear so much about. They're the ultimate matchmakers in this whole digital world.
Okay, yeah, I see it now. Amazon connects me with like everything I buy, Uber with rides, Spotify with music. It's all about these connections.
Exactly. And to grow quickly, because these platforms are all about speed, the source talks about two main strategies:
Yeah.
network effects and something called cross-subsidization.
Okay, I've definitely heard of network effects, but remind me again how that works.
Sure. It's basically the more, the merrier. The more users a platform has, the more attractive it becomes for even more people to join.
Like Facebook, if all your friends are on there.
Precisely. Each new user makes the platform more valuable for everyone, like a snowball effect. That's how you get these massive platforms that dominate.
Right, like who wants to be the only one using a social media platform no one else is on? Makes sense. But what was that other thing? Cross something.
Cross-subsidization. It's actually really clever. Think of all the stuff Google gives away for free: search, email, maps.
Yeah, tons of stuff.
They can afford to do that because
Yeah.
they make money from you using those free services.
Mm.
They use those profits to subsidize the growth of another part of their business advertising.
So it's like one hand washes the other. I get it now. But it's kind of wild when you really think about it. And this source is saying it's not just one type of platform, right? Like this stuff is everywhere.
That's what makes it so fascinating. The source breaks it down into 5 main types of platforms, each with its own way of using data. Let's start with the obvious advertising platforms like your Googles and your Facebooks.
Over the ones we all know and maybe love to hate a little.
Right. They basically track everything you do online, every click, every scroll, analyze it all, and then sell access to that information to advertisers who want to reach people just like you,
So they're selling our attention. It's like a personalized digital billboard, only way creepier.
pretty much. Then we have what are called cloud platforms, your Amazon Web Services. Those are the big ones.
Amazon again, what are they doing this time?
Think of them like landlords of the digital world. They own all the servers, software, and all that complicated infrastructure that businesses need these days. And instead of everyone having to build their own expensive data centers, companies can just, rent what they need from Amazon.
So Amazon is like the digital landlord and data is the new .rent. I'm kind of running with this analogy.
You got it. It's efficient, it's scalable, and it gives companies like Amazon incredible power in the digital world. But it doesn't stop there. The source also talks about how platforms are moving beyond the purely digital world. We're talking about industrial platforms now.
Wait, are we talking like robots and smart factories now? How does that fit into this whole platform thing?
Okay, so imagine a factory where every machine is connected. Like they're all sharing data in real-time information on production, maintenance, even predicting problems before they happen.
That sounds intense.
Right. That's the industrial internet for you. And there are companies whose whole thing is creating the software and hardware to make it all happen. Companies like GE, Siemens, they're becoming the architects of this whole interconnected industrial world.
And they're using platforms
Yeah.
to do it.
Platforms are the backbone. We're talking about mountains of data being collected from sensors on machines and products, even the supply chain.
So seriously, this is way bigger than just tech companies then. It's changing everything. But what else are they, platformizing these days?
Well, we can't forget about product platforms. Companies like, say, Spotify, or even, get this, Rolls-Royce.
Hmm.
They're actually turning traditional goods into services.
Okay, Spotify, I get. Like, I'm paying for access to music instead of buying CDs or whatever. But Rolls-Royce, what are they doing, like renting out jet engines now?
You're closer than you think. They're actually pioneers in this whole goods as a service thing. So instead of selling an engine to an airline, they'll lease it out and charge per hour of use.
Wow, so instead of owning the engine, you're just renting it. Data is changing everything.
It really is the key. But, it's not all sunshine and roses. We still have to talk about the potential downsides, especially for workers, in this brave new platform-driven world. And we'll get into that, including this whole idea of the lean platform, which doesn't sound super worker-friendly to me right after this.
Okay, so we've seen how platforms are everywhere, from factories to like our Spotify playlists. But I think we got to talk about the big question. What about the people in this whole platform world, this lean platform thing the source talks about? It doesn't sound great for workers.
Yeah, this is where things get kind of complicated. Platforms can definitely create jobs, but they often look really different from, traditional jobs. Think more like gig work, contract labor, that whole Uberization of everything.
Right, the gig economy. It's everywhere these days, but it seems like this source is saying maybe it's not the whole story and maybe not even as new as we think it is.
Totally. It's easy to get caught up in the flexibility of being your own boss.
Yeah.
But the reality for a lot of platform workers is way less stable. Remember how we were talking about platforms being lean?
Yeah, like that's a good thing.
Well, a lot of times that means outsourcing as much as possible to cut costs, and that includes labor.
So instead of having, employees with benefits, platforms rely on this network of independent contractors.
Exactly. It lets them avoid a lot of the costs and responsibilities that come with, traditional employment. And this source is saying this isn't just about like Uber drivers or Airbnb hosts. It's even happening to white-collar jobs.
It's like we're going back in time or something, but instead of factories, it's the platform that's the new factory floor. Except it's like global now and even harder to see.
That's a really good way to put it. And it brings up all these questions about workers' rights, wages, the whole future of work, really. The source makes the point that platforms could actually make things worse when it comes to inequality in the job market.
Especially for people who, don't have those in-demand skills or resources to begin with. It's a lot to wrap your head around. But this source doesn't just critique the lean platform, right? Like it actually suggests this model might not even be sustainable. What do you think about that?
It's a really interesting point. Despite all the hype, a lot of these lean platforms, they aren't actually making money yet. They're relying on like venture capital and this promise that they'll be the next big thing.
So it's like a high-stakes game of Monopoly where everyone's trying to build the biggest hotel, but nobody actually knows if anyone's going to have enough money to pay rent when it's all over.
Perfect analogy. And, like the source points out, that kind of unsustainable growth can lead to some serious issues down the line. Think back to, like, the dot-com bubble bursting in the late 90s.
Yeah, not good.
Exactly. A lot of those companies were essentially like building castles on sand. They looked impressive for a while.
And then the tide came in. So you're saying we need to look beyond the shiny surface of some of these platforms and think about, like, the long game.
Exactly. This source is all about encouraging us to think critically about these platforms, how they work, what they're promising, and whether it all actually adds up.
So if lean platforms like Uber and Airbnb aren't necessarily the future of work, what does this source offer as, like, an alternative? What are we supposed to do?
But it's less about having one perfect solution and more about, I think, seeing the bigger picture. These platform business models, they're not going anywhere, but they're still evolving super fast.
So it's not if platforms are going to reshape the economy, it's how.
Exactly. We need to be paying attention to these trends, figuring out how platforms operate, and most importantly, asking the tough questions about how we can make sure this new world is fair and sustainable for everyone. Remember, these platforms are all about extracting and using data. It's in their DNA.
And that data is coming from us, right? Our online habits, what we buy, even where we go. Kind of creepy when you think about it.
It is a little bit. And it gives these platforms a ton of power and influence. What we do as consumers, as workers, as citizens, it's all going to play a huge role in shaping this whole platform economy.
It's definitely both exciting and a little scary all at the same time. Like we're on the edge of this huge shift, both technologically and just like as a society. But hey, at least this source doesn't totally leave us hanging, right?
Not at all. It ends by asking us this really thought-provoking question. What happens when these platforms control not just our data, but like essential stuff, things like transportation, energy, even our healthcare system?
Okay, yeah, that's definitely going to be keeping me up at night. I mean, it sounds like a sci-fi movie, but at the same time, it's not that far-fetched when you really think about it. Honestly, I'm a little overwhelmed after that last thought. Feels kind of like we're just along for the ride in this whole platform revolution.
It's definitely a lot to process, yeah. But hey, this source isn't about freaking us out. It's about giving us the knowledge to understand this new world,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And knowledge is power, especially with all the information overload these days. Like once you get how platforms operate, how they're designed, how they grab our attention, how they use our data, you can start making smarter choices.
So it's about being more aware as consumers, like, maybe thinking twice before hitting that accept all cookies button, or those ads that are like weirdly specific to me.
Exactly. But it's bigger than just our individual choices, too. I
Yeah.
need to be having these conversations as a society,
Yeah.
about regulations, about ethics, about what we actually want the future to look like with all this tech. Because platforms themselves, they're not inherently good or bad. They're just tools.
Right, like that saying, you can use a hammer to build a house or to, well, to tear one down. It's all about the choices we make. So, if we're trying to build something better with these tools, what are some, I don't know, key takeaways from our deep dive into platform capitalism today?
Well, first off, this source gives us this really useful framework for just understanding platforms, their strengths, weaknesses, how they could impact things. Awareness is key. From
Mm.
there, we got to be willing to think critically.
Don't just believe the hype.
Exactly. Question the assumptions. Look for different viewpoints. Think about the consequences, good and bad. And lastly, we can't forget that this isn't something just happening to us. It's not like we're just watching a movie, right?
We're in it.
We're active participants in shaping this platform world, whether it's through what we buy, how we vote, even just having these conversations with friends and family.
So it's a call to action, this source, like a reminder that we're not powerless in all of this.
Absolutely. This deep dive, it's just the beginning. There's a whole world of information out there just waiting to be explored.
Love it. And on that note, we'll catch you all on our next deep dive. Until then, keep exploring.